Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Jenny Aiello, and this is With Love, Jenny, a podcast where we meet ourselves right in the heart of our vulnerability and authenticity. In this sacred space where it's just you and I dive into real life, rich with wisdom and opportunities for deep healing. I explore what it means to truly connect to ourselves, to each other, and to something much greater than us all. In each podcast, I like to meet life right where it touches us most, in our tenderness, in our truth, in our struggles and our strength. So wherever you are on your journey, or whatever it is that you're carrying, no matter how light or heavy, just know I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin today's episode. Hi there, I'm Jenny. I'm here with my co-host, Kristen, and we are ready to dive into today's story about something that's really prevalent in our society, but we rarely openly share it, and that's our vulnerability. Right now, I think we mostly present ourselves in the best light, especially in the world of social media, where everyone seems to be living a picture-perfect life, or they're spewing anger and judgment and heated opinions that are very provocative on social media. But where do we go and what do we do when we're experiencing extreme vulnerability? There's stuff going on behind the scenes of all of our lives, and we don't often know if, when, or how to really share it. And, what does it mean to be broken? And I mean really heartbroken. How do we share that with others? This is the kind of broken, what we're talking about today is the kind of broken that happens when life has just beaten us down to the ground and we feel like we have no strength to get back up. I know I've been there more than a few times. I know, Kristen, you and I have shared those moments. And I imagine you who are listening have had them too, where you're just sitting in a pile of vulnerability and brokenness. So one of my favorite books right now is called Falling Down and Getting Up. And I want to share a part of the book by Mark Nepo. I want to share it because that's what he's talking about. It's the whole book is about this, and we're gonna have a discussion about it. But here's what Mark Nepo writes in a part of his book. He says, "Being broken is never fun. No one seeks being broken. No one asks for it. But like erosion, being broken is a developmental phase of growth, not a deficiency. We have stigmatized being broken as a sign of damage or weakness. Yet, mysteriously, it is being broken open that leads to all transformation. Rather than deny or resist this phase of growth, it is inevitable we might better focus our efforts on mapping the new terrain on the other side of the break. What new way of thinking, feeling, or being are we being led to?" He goes on to say, "It is, of course, understandable that this developmental phase of being broken is painful and hard to endure. Another reason we need each other, to help each other endure the breaking, to help each other enter the vastness opened by the break, and to marvel together at the wonder revealed." Well, for me, as I reflected back on a time that I found myself in the process of being broken open, I noticed there was also a very thick cord that connected me to the process. And that cord was that of control. No one wants to be broken. He's right. It's not fun. It feels horrible. It's painful. So we often will do everything we can to avoid it, to control our circumstances, to control other people, to do whatever we have to do to prevent it from happening in the first place. I have to admit, I'm good at that. I succeed at that more often than not. But what price do we pay when we prevent the very part of us that needs to be set free by being broken open? I've had, as I said, a lot of experience with being broken open. I didn't view it as a transformational invitation at the time. And I want to share a series of things that I was faced with a little over a decade ago. And eventually, we're going to go into these stories on a much deeper, intimate level in upcoming podcasts. But for now, I just want to paint a picture of how life can throw whammies at us all at once. And then what do we do when we can't feel like we just don't know how to get back up? I got to the place where I felt like life knocked me down and I was like, I don't want to get back up. It's just going to keep hitting me. I'll just stay down. I don't want to even try to get back up. So let me tell you a little bit of these stories. I'm just going to touch on them, and then I'm going to talk about how uncomfortable it is, even in thinking about what I wanted to share. I found myself not wanting to share it. And that actually is the part of what I want us to talk about today. But first, I'm going to share. So it began where I was trying to think where this breaking open began. And I'm just going to jump in at this point. My oldest child, my daughter, who I was very, very close to, had left for college. And during that time, I could feel her pulling away from our relationship. I thought that was a pretty normal thing at the time because that's what happens at that age. But by the time she graduated, it had become pretty evident that things between us just weren't the way that I thought they were going to be. And it was so disheartening to me because she was my person. She was my person, and probably too much so, given the rough road we found ourselves on later. But at the time, I thought this was a pretty big deal in my life, and it was a big struggle, and it was heartbreaking to me. In the midst of that, in the years that followed, I had another one of my children began struggling with a serious addiction. And then in the midst of that, my dad, who had a slow progression of prostate cancer for years, was told it's time to get your house in order and that he had about 6 months to live. My parents actually lived with us. And so we were all a very tight-knit family, or at least I felt like we were. So with all of that going on, just those three complex situations colliding together, I found myself scrambling to process it. I couldn't get through one thing before the next one hit me head on. And there were probably a half a dozen other pretty heartbreaking stories that weren't on that magnitude that were sprinkled in between. Just when I thought I wasn't going to be able to handle one more thing, my mother-in-law lost her eyesight and was suffering from pretty significant dementia, and she needed care, and she lived 2,600 miles away. All of that fell on Bob and I. So we were now navigating all that other stuff with last-minute plane rides across the country every 6 weeks to take care of her. We were stretched thin. My son's addiction grew worse. My dad, who was both my strength and my heartache all at once, was declining. And I thought, I'm drowning. I'm drowning in overwhelm. I'm drowning in grief. I don't have time to adequately process what's happening around me and all these people that I love. And it was really dark. It felt like the lights went out, and I was just feeling my way through a very dark, very heavy, very difficult time. And it was pretty hard to access possibilities and hope and light when so many things were hard. The hardest part of that particular time in my life was feeling that no one saw what was really happening. I mean, maybe they did, but I didn't feel like anyone noticed. Expectations for me to be smiles and sunshine all the time became evident even to people within our house. It's like I wasn't allowed to fall apart. I wasn't allowed to feel that pain. I was there to hold everybody else up and make everybody else okay. And I felt like I was failing miserably, not just to hold myself together, but to make sure everyone else was okay. And therein was that little cord of control. I was trying to control everything. I was trying to stop cancer. I was trying to stop an addiction. I was trying to stop a relationship that mattered to me from deteriorating. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't stop all those circumstances. I just wanted it to get better, and it didn't. So the question becomes, what do we do when life caves in all around you? What do you do when grief and challenging circumstances grip you by the heart and just won't let go? And there's so many different avenues to choose from. There's so many different ways that we could go with this. And it's that vulnerability of being broken open that we try to avoid it. We try to resist it. We try to control it. And it just happens. So when I read this book in hindsight, because this was a decade or more ago, when I was reading this book, and it was like, what if that was a path of transformation? I can stand before you all today, tell this story, and say, yes, it was. I also want to stop here because I said this a minute ago, but I didn't want to share this with you all on this podcast. I didn't want to go through those few little hints of what I was going through because it sounded victim-y. It's like, I didn't want it to be feel sorry for me episode, right? I didn't want to share that with you so that I could garner some kind of empathy or sympathy. Because I'm an empowerment coach, there's something in me that doesn't like the victim stories, but that doesn't allow me to experience my own victim story in life if I continue to avoid it or control it or reframe it or just suppress it or leave it in the past and not process it. And so I do want to talk about my mindset with you around sharing our vulnerable stories with each other and what we need to know about that. I just don't like victim stories, and I don't like sharing this period of my life because in telling it, it sounds sort of whiny and complaining. And like I said, feel sorry for me. But the truth is, it was hard. This was what I call the dark decade. I had no roadmap. I suddenly was facing things that I couldn't control and had no experience with, and I didn't know what I was doing. And it was scary. And there was a lot on the line. And as a recovering control addict, I was in the middle of my brokenness and everything in my life was out of control. And because I don't like that feeling of being powerless, and I don't like admitting that I can't control something, I trap myself in a place of rising above it all every day rather than surrendering to it. I isolated myself. My world grew very small. I had no energy left to give anyone or anything outside of my family's needs. It was literally putting one foot in front of the other, feeling my way through the dark every day. I was in the process of being broken open, only I didn't know it at the time. Now I see how a new life force grew out of that brokenness that came with all those challenging years. And that life force did transform me. I made a choice not to let what I was going through define me, but instead create me. That was my version of surrender. I chose to allow it to just help me grow and learn and heal. And I think that's actually what buoyed me up. That was the birthplace of what I needed to get through it. When I accepted instead of rejected, when I allowed instead of controlled, it all began to almost go from counterclockwise to clockwise. I still had to get through it, but I could do that in a way that empowered me in the midst of being completely broken open, vulnerable, and watching everything around me be out of my control. So, Kristen, jump in and let's just sort of dive into some of this because it's really intricate, delicate. There's so much to it that I would love for us to flesh out to hear some of your opinions and stories.
I just keep thinking, life happens.
Yep.
As much as consumerism or TV wants to teach you that it can be perfect, it's not. And
No.
then we get so hard on ourselves when it breaks because oh, why me? Like the victim.
Yes.
But it's almost natural, like you said, you have to, even nature has to go through erosion, all of this stuff to recalibrate and be the best that it can be. It's not always perfect. That's why I keep thinking as you're talking. But I'm wondering, was there a defining moment in that brokenness when you realized the healthy step for you, or were there synchronicities happening that kept popping up for you to think, oh, I need to accept this? Or were you talking to someone to get support? Or how did this happen for you?
Oh, there were so many. There's so many parts to that question, so many answers to it. In honesty, I think that that sense of feeling powerless is what I think was the awareness that I thought everything I have ever done to get to this point in my life has worked, and now it isn't. Everything I counted on to get me by was failing me in the way that I had used them. And I got angry. I went through a period where I got really angry at life. Why? Why does all this have to be happening at once? Why can't I just have one of these things to deal with? Why do I have to have all of it? Why, in the midst of that, do I have to have other dramas breaking out that weren't supportive for me? The little things were really big things to me at that point. It was salt and wounds. It was like people going by throwing salt in the wound without realizing. I don't think they realized how vulnerable I was. I present myself as on top of things, and to my family especially, it's like I'm fully capable. I am large and in charge around here. I let myself seem to be invincible. And so I taught people to count on me. And then I couldn't be invincible. I couldn't go on and not break open and break apart. And it was a destructive process. And when I was in the downward spiral of breaking open, I got angry and I started turning over every stone that I could. I actually said, all right, I need my faith. I knew that. So I created a sacred space in my home that anytime I couldn't take it anymore, I went in that space and I opened up to God. I used my faith to bring light into that darkness, and that was my number one go-to. I got into therapy and family therapy because we were all, whoever would be willing to come and talk, we had to, with my son's addiction, because that was a freight train, ripping right through our family. And my child I was losing a child, and that, that's scary, really scary. But I was also losing my dad, and he was one of my rocks in life. He was one that I could count on to give me that sage advice and to remind me. Both my parents would remind me, like, Jenny, you're going to be okay. And I had seen them overcome a lot of heartbreaking, a lot of being broken open. And I knew that they had modeled it to me. But when I was in it, I didn't feel like I could depend on my mom. She was losing her husband. I didn't want to be my last days with my dad telling a sad story. I wanted him to know I told him, I'm okay. We're doing great. I wanted him to know that, even though he was so intuitive that he probably knew that I was being strong for him. But that's what I was putting my energy into, is letting people look at me and think, okay, well, yeah, there's stuff going on, but she's okay. But inside, I was really falling apart. I was falling down hard. So therapy helped me. I also, at that time, enrolled in a wellness course. I started learning. One of my favorite things to do is learn. Learning to me is getting empowered. And at a time that I needed to understand, how do I take care of my body, mind, and spirit? Because it was all hands on deck for all three. I was psychologically and my mental health getting therapy. I was using my faith and resources for that to help me spiritually. And then I was needing to take care of me physically. And what do I need to know? Because I was carrying heavy energy in my energy body, and how to process that. So I took a wellness course, and I have to say that all three of those merged together and led me to really what I do today, which is culminating in this podcast of sharing what I learned, in that experience of falling apart. And learning to surrender was so hard. I think that word surrender is so misunderstood, because the first thought when I would hear the word surrender is giving up. It's like waving the white flag and saying, I give up. But in truth, in some ways, that is what I was doing. It was like, okay, I give up, which means I have to surrender to a higher power. I have to surrender to something outside of myself, greater than me, because me by myself over here, me, my ego, and I, we aren't doing too hot. We're not getting it done. We're not getting this job done very well. So I immersed in my own self-care. And that opens up a whole nother topic of, is it selfish to stop and say, right now, this is what my self-care is. It calls you to all hands on deck for taking care of me, because I was taking care of all those people. And it was up to me to make sure I was doing what I needed to be able to have the energy and the strength and the courage to stand back up again. And so what I learned in all of those situations was enormous. It was enormous. And the tools that I developed in that collision, where I just woke up one day and said, I don't even want to get out of bed. I don't know how to go do my life right now. What I learned and how I learned to sit up and then stand up straight and find a resource within that helped me take a step forward after that brokenness occurred it's what my heart really wants to share that, because I just believe there's a lot of people like me out there trying to be brave and trying to put a brave face out in the world, and afraid to share their vulnerabilities and afraid to say, I can't do this anymore. And I'm feeling really alone. And I want you to know you're not. And we'll talk about this, but it's important to not isolate in that loneliness, but that's what our instinct is. And so it's what does it take to do this? And it does take a lot of discernment. It takes a lot of strength. It takes faith. It takes guidance. And it does take a deep breath to say, I'm going to allow everything I have to surrender. I'm just going to allow this stuff to flow. So yeah, to answer that question is a big question. Kristen, you're so good at these big questions, because there was a lot of things I had to do, and it wasn't by myself. It was reaching out to the right people to get help.
The word willingness keeps coming to me too. Like, you're surrendering, but you also have to be willing for the possibilities, I guess.
Yeah.
Because you get in this, I think you almost naturally, but not healthily, that's a word, get in this mind frame of when you're down in that low energy and all this is happening, you only see the worst outcome. Mm-hmm. And so the energy is piling on and on and on. But if you can stop and take care of yourself, that's when it feels lighter, and you can see hope of different outcomes. And that kind of releases the stress that you think is inevitable. Well, this is what is going to happen.
Right. Right. It's so true. And that willingness is an opening, right? It is an opening, and that lets the light in. And that's what, we're going for. That's where the hope is. But if you get so trapped in the downward descent into the brokenness and get trapped there in the victim mindset, you do start feeling more comfortable expecting the worst because you are preparing for it. Like, I'll be prepared when it happens again, rather than surrender in and be willing to see that this too shall pass. Those are strong words, for very strong words that I said this a lot to myself. This too shall pass. You know, I won't be in this storm forever. Nature teaches us so much. That was something that I think I learned, is that I would go outside and I would take walks and nature would speak to me. And, you know, there's times where I went on a long walk and a rain cloud came up and I would be like panicked and wanting to hurry up, and I had running out of breath and getting, you know, winded and trying to get home before I got drenched, and then thought, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? I'll get drenched, you know, like I'll just get home and I'll change my clothes. And I would hear that word, like, this too shall pass. It's like, we don't stay in these storms. We love it when we're in the sunshiny days and life is good and daisies are blooming and birds are singing. Guess what? This too shall pass, right?
One thing that I learned too, watching my dad go through some really hard health issues, is you just got to get through it. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. As much as it sucks and it is horrible, you have to go through it. But what you can rely on is your inner faith, I guess, or like, that's where I've learned to go with my spirituality, because no matter what, like you said, you can't always be in control. Even in nature, a tornado is going to happen or an earthquake is going to come. You cannot stop it. But how do you get through it and give yourself grace and compassion? Like, nobody teaches us that.
Right. And it's so necessary. Right.
Yeah. And it is possible. But a lot of people don't know that.
As a matter of fact, I think that, at least for me, somehow I felt it was self-centered or selfish to allow room for me to have that self-care and that self-compassion and the grace that.
Well, why do you get excluded? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Why are you excluded in that scenario and you seem selfish?
I know. And I'm busy. It was a mindset that I had to make everybody okay. So in previous podcasts we've talked about, I was a people pleaser and I had codependency issues. And if everybody wasn't okay, it wasn't okay for me to be not okay. You know, I couldn't be okay till everyone was taken care of, which was a formula of self-neglect. And I was self-neglecting myself to the point that when everything spiraled out of control and I was sitting in my vulnerability, feeling so incredibly powerless, there was nothing left to do except take care of myself. And that included compassion. I want to share another part to talk about that very thing, Kristen, because during this time, you know, when we have dreams sometimes and they're so vivid and you just know that it's your subconscious trying to tell you something. And my dreams, they don't, you know, I have very wild and crazy dreams that are so vivid sometimes, and they often don't make sense. So this is going to be one of those. But I want to tell you about this dream that I had. And it was when I was in the midst of all that vulnerability. I was rollerblading with my daughter. We were going around a Shelley Lake that's near our home where we live. And we were on a paved path that winds around the lake. And we were rollerblading. Now, in real life, I've never rollerbladed in my life, but for some reason in my dream, that's what we were out doing. And I was really good at it. So I'm rollerblading with my daughter. And in this dream, let me just say, I could rollerblade really good. And I was in incredible shape, like super strong, super everything. And I was going along and I could rollerblade and we were laughing. I was making all the moves and it just felt so free. And my hair was blowing. I felt free. I felt so good. I mean, what a feeling, right? What a feeling. We were laughing. We're going along and we were going really fast. So I was really confident and free and we were laughing. My daughter was too. And suddenly I noticed up ahead, there was a huge stick across our path. And it was right in front of where my daughter was getting ready to go. And she wasn't looking at it. She was looking away. And so she didn't see it coming. And so in my dream, I quickly grabbed her, steered her to safety over on my side. But in turn, I hit the stick. I crashed into a tree hard. And I mean, I crashed and burned. And so this is kind of the weird part of my dream. Once I crashed into this tree, I was laying in a whole bed of pine straw. And I looked down to see if I was hurt or did I skin my knees, and I noticed that my legs were like the legs of the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. They were scattered all over the place and they were made of straw. I was scraping them back together. There's a scene in that movie where the Scarecrow is trying to put himself back together. Well, I was that. I was trying to get the straw back into my pants to put my legs back on. And I couldn't even gather it up. I couldn't reach the bottoms of my legs to pull them back up and put them on. So, in my subconscious mind, what I think it was saying, in this dream is that it's a gory image I had of myself. It was a powerless image. It's like what it meant to take away my ability to enjoy life. And at that time, I felt I was losing my ability to enjoy life, right? Because that's where this dream went to a nightmare inside the dream. So obviously, the dream went on. My daughter kept going on her rollerblades and never even noticed my demise. And I knew that, well, it's okay because it's a big circle. So she's going to circle around. She'll come and find me. And then she'll help me put my legs back on. And I noticed that other people were walking by with their dogs and some bicycling and others were skating by. And they didn't notice me sitting there either. And I was like, what the heck? Why would someone not stop to help someone whose legs obviously were scattered everywhere? And pretty soon I heard my daughter and she came back by again the second time. She didn't help me at all. Instead, she got mad at me. She was really angry because I had ruined her beautiful day. She left and I just sat there alone and noticed that I was completely unable to function. And now I've let her down. Now, my daughter wouldn't have done that in real life. That's not what this dream was telling me, but it was telling me that everybody was having an experience, not just me. Everyone, she was losing her grandfather. Our whole family was losing my son in an addiction. Our whole family was experiencing all of this, not just me. And when I was going through that, wondering why nobody was noticing me, I was drowning in my own survival mechanisms. They were too. Right. So it was this dream was teaching me a lot of that. Our dreams in our subconscious mind conjures up many intricate images to describe our inner world, especially when we're feeling vulnerable. And that was what this dream was doing. So in it, I was faced with my complete lack of control. I was facing my biggest fears of abandonment, which is what that dream was teaching me. I was learning very quickly that I couldn't do all of this by myself. I was going to need help. And I was going to have to learn to receive help. I not only had to receive it, I had to ask in the first place. So asking for help and then actually receiving it sometimes take a lot of courage. It did for me. And so I was also facing my own mistakes. I was coming face to face with my own codependency, my fear of failure, my need for control. I was witnessing all of my deepest vulnerabilities at one time. And so while this had nothing to do with my daughter and I rollerblading, it had everything to do with my deepest fears coming up into my consciousness through this dream. And that's why I began this with the words from Mark Nepo. Falling down and getting up creates resiliency and strength. It creates interdependence and confidence. It teaches us to take risks knowing that we are capable of handling the outcome. It teaches us about our faith, our core beliefs, what it takes to shift away from fear and step into the reassurance that we can and will find hope if we look for it. And those years that I went through put me on a path of personal growth like none other in my entire lifetime. They were hard. They were challenging. They knocked me to my knees more than once. Sometimes it felt like those years were actually trying to dismantle me. And now that I think about that or say that in hindsight, that's exactly what those years did. They dismantled all the limiting beliefs that I had that helped me stay in control of my life and allowed them to just go away. And I had to say goodbye to my dad that year. And I had to say hello to my son's addiction to heroin. I had to say goodbye to a business that I loved and hello to the task of taking care of our parents. I said goodbye to seeing the world with rose-colored glasses. And I had to say hello to facing life head on, feet grounded, and learn what it meant to live in faith. And today, I'm sharing these stories, and we're going to dive into all of them in future episodes, because if I were able to help someone grow and deepen in their faith and deepen their connection to one another and to life itself, Kristen and I really want to share these journeys of ours, because we don't want you to be alone. We don't want you to feel powerless, even in the sense of being powerless. And I want our vulnerability to be known so that the energy of growth can take root in our hope and our faith, and we can do this together with love. Do you have any closing thoughts, Kristen?
I do, but I feel like it could take us on a tangent.
Go ahead. Go for it.
I think that a lot of times, like even, I'm going to believe that me personally, I'm going to say this out loud, but like even in the Bible, like with the flood or these big things, I think these big things are put in our path because it is the only way we will listen. It is the only way that we will really pay attention and possibly, if we're willing, break open and heal or grow. Not even heal. It might not necessarily mean you need to heal from something, but something that you need to learn from to go forward. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I do think that it's the breaking open part. The parts that break open do have to heal, because it's usually someone or something that broke us, right? And it causes a wound. And I think that the process of transformation is going through it, what you said earlier, not around it and not over it, not under it, but through it. I say you have to feel it to heal it. So when you surrender and allow yourself to feel the brokenness and heal, that's in the midst of that, this life force energy emerges. I think about the acorn and how it's this little hard-shelled seed that gets planted in the darkness. And the first thing that happens is destruction. When there's a life force inside, every single acorn is an oak tree, every single one of them. And the ones that get planted in darkness, basically, they go under in the earth, and this life force awakens. The first thing that has to happen is that hard shell has to crack apart. Growth is destructive. We have to dismantle the very shell that was holding the life force, has to dismantle. It has to deconstruct. It has to fall apart. And so all of that in our mind, our beliefs, in our energy field, in our circumstances, in the story we tell, everything has to just kind of deconstruct. But when we allow that to happen and trust, it's happening for me, not to me. Trust that. Those words, I think that's the bridge between the victim story, oh, look what happened to me back then, and that was such a sad story, to look what happened for me. Because from that, I can't imagine where I'd be if I didn't allow that to help me grow. And I healed as much as I'm still working on some of the healing parts of that journey, but I allowed that life force to come through and teach me and expand me and my courage. I grew so much. And I felt energized by that. It's like if that happened for me to become more and to grow, if that happened for me to learn, if that happened for me to help others one day, if that happened for me to be able to bring wisdom to light through a podcast or my coaching or just sitting with a friend, it's really all good. It's for good.
I mean, I truly feel, and I know that you do too, the main reason we are here is for our spiritual evolution.
Yes.
Our soul came here to learn certain things. We didn't know how it was going to happen.
We didn't know it was going to hurt.
Like, I want to learn how to truly love. Well, you might have to go in this lifetime through some really crappy things if you want to know how to truly love unconditionally.
Right.
It's not going to be this Leave It to Beaver, Hallmark movie that you're going to go through to truly love.
Right. Yeah. Our greatest growth comes from our hardest lessons, right?
So if you can at least get to the point where everything, which is what you've taught me, everything is always happening for your highest good, no matter what it looks like. Like, what's that story? I think it was like a Chinese parable. And then I think you've heard it before, where this guy in China in the 1800s, let's say, all these things kept coming by to diminish his farm. And he kept saying, people would come up to him and say, oh, isn't that so horrible? How are you ever going to get through this? He's like, no, let's see what happens tomorrow, or something like that. I'm telling the story wrong. But because of his outlook, the end story is like everything ended up happening beautifully.
Right. The good and the not good parts.
Right. I mean, the bad happened.
Yeah.
His son came home from the war and lost a leg. Well, how are you going to go on with your farm? Well, we'll see. I don't remember how the story went, but it was very inspiring to me.
Yeah. And it's just it is an attitude of being willing, back to your word willing, to look for that lifeline, to look for the hope, to look for what is this teaching me? Look for how can I use this for good? How can I take what I'm going through and be helpful to another? That brings us out of that story and into a connected place where we can do something good with it. And that's huge.
Well, and also too, I think part of this whole lesson in Earth School is how to reconnect or really learn how to have a relationship with your soul.
Yes.
Like you're inside. Like,
yes.
Would you even acknowledge that was even a thing if life was so perfect? Like, you wouldn't have to.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't really
wouldn't that be heaven if life was so perfect? I would already be with your soul.
Right. That's where we'd live, right? And we sometimes get caught that this is all there is. This is, I am my body and my reality. And there is another aspect. The spiritual part of us is the one that can surpass all of our challenges and heartbreaks and, setbacks, which are really setups for going forward in a better way.
And I think we remember that, or we're with that part of ourselves when we're young, but as we go into the world, you forget that is also a part of you.
We bring it with us. And I think it's a lot of remembering, which is back to my scarecrow legs. I was having to remember to put the members of my body back on, right? It's remembering who we are innately, spiritually.
Like we are mind, body, and spirit. We're not just mind and body.
Right. Or just mind. Some people
just mind.
That ego can just be it all for someone. So I want to just touch on one more thing. And I know we're a long podcast today, but I feel like it's so rich with so many components. So we really want to hear from you guys about what you're taking away from this podcast, and would love it if you would share that with us. But I want to talk about this last piece, because when I was in that space of powerlessness and vulnerability and heartache, I mean, it's one thing to be vulnerable, and when your heart's breaking, on top of that, it's a lot. And I mentioned that I isolated. My world got really, really small. I kind of pulled my energy in because I needed all of it to survive that. And at the same time, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be okay in there by myself. I had to find a way to connect to other people and to get help. And one of the things, I made a mistake because I began sharing this experience with people who weren't prepared to sit with me in my pain. I began sharing it with anybody that came along who would say, how are you? And I would go, oh, do they really mean that? Because I want to tell somebody how I am right now. And I made the mistake of being vulnerable with people who were not in a place that could handle that. There's a lot of people that care, and a lot of people are really uncomfortable with other people being not okay. And so what that looked like is I would share my story, and then they would start sharing how theirs was bad too. And they would begin telling me about their big sad story. And I'm like, wait, I don't have anything that I can give you right now. I'm asking for help. And then I found myself using my energy to actually help them. Other people will try to fix it. Other people would try to rescue and say, what can I do? That question. And I would be like a deer in the headlight. Like, I have no idea what you can do except just say you see me and remind me that this too shall pass. Those are words. You don't want to say them insensitively. If someone's hurting, oh, well, get over it. It'll pass. But do say you're going to get through this. Brighter days are ahead. Let's learn what can you do to be able to let them be heard and witness their pain. Be a witness to their pain and just say, I see that you're hurting. I see how hard this is. And I want you to know you're not alone. I don't have the answers. You're going to find them though. And I will walk with you until you get out of this transition that you're in. And so that's a huge gift to give another person. If you know someone going through a hard time, I see you, I hear you, I'm here with you. I don't have the answers. Only you can find those, but I'll stay with you while you figure this out. And I feel like that's what I needed to hear. I felt like there was not very many people, but when I did find the people that could help me, that's the message that buoyed me up more than anything else.
I just want to say that really reminds me of this Chinese parable that I've seen go through on social media a couple times. And I just want to read it out loud because I think it's super powerful. So here it goes. A long time ago, a poor Chinese farmer lost a horse, and all the neighbors came around and said, well, that's too bad. The farmer said, maybe. Shortly after, the horse returned, bringing another horse with him, and all the neighbors came around and said, well, that's good fortune. To which the farmer replied, maybe. The next day, the farmer's son was trying to tame the new horse and fell, breaking his leg. And all the neighbors came around and said, well, that's too bad. And the farmer replied, maybe. Shortly after, the emperor declared war on a neighboring nation and ordered all able-bodied men to come fight. Many died or were badly maimed. But the farmer's son was unable to fight and spared due to his injury. All the neighbors came around and said, well, that's good fortune. To which the farmer replied, maybe. And the story goes on. And I just think that's super powerful to look at life that way. So I just wanted to share that story.
Right. It's perfect for what we're talking about because that's the example of things can be good and things can be bad if that's the way we view them. If we put a judgment on what we're experiencing as good or bad based on our feelings, because we have feelings that don't feel good. Sad feelings feel bad. Vulnerable feelings aren't comfortable. So we put a label of bad. But if we said, maybe these things are actually good. Maybe those feelings of vulnerability are here to help me heal and to grow and lead me into transformation. Like they're leading me to something greater. But we have to be willing to experience them, learn from them, look for our hope within them, look for the ways that they're honing us to be better humans. And that's so powerful. So today I'm sharing as many of these stories with you as I can. Kristen is sharing her stories of vulnerability and life circumstances, because if we are here to grow and deepen our connection to God, to one another, to life itself, we have to know how not only to break open, but how to let our vulnerability be known, and then to allow the energy of growth to take root in our hope and our faith with love. I created a meditation that is more of a healing visualization than a meditation for those of you who may be stuck in grief or moments of trauma, or reflecting back on periods where you were breaking down, falling down, and not being able to get up so easy. You can find it over in the Blessing Room on Patreon. We're going to continue our discussion over there. It is a powerful visualization, and I also will warn everyone not to do it unless you're in the comfort of a safe space at home and a place where you can journal afterward, because that part of me that felt like I had dismantled, broken my limbs were scattered into the pine straw, and I couldn't get help and I couldn't get up. That girl, that young woman that was rollerblading in my dream, there's a part of me that was still there, still stuck in that sense of vulnerability. Life and the current of situations moved me out of it, but I needed to go back and put her back together, and piece by piece, heal, bring love and light into that space that she found herself in. So I'll share that with you over in the Blessing Room, and we hope to talk to you over there. And if not, we will talk to you in a couple weeks with our next episode of With Love, Jenny. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you found a spark of wisdom to carry with you, and maybe even a deeper invitation to heal and grow and transform through your own beautiful story. Or maybe this episode made you think of someone who could use encouragement. And if so, I hope you will share it with them. If you'd like to learn more about working with me or attending one of my healing retreats, coaching programs, and other offerings, you can visit my website at jennyaiello.com or email me directly at jenny@jaiello.com. You'll find all the links in the show notes. If today's episode touched you, it would mean the world if you would leave a review or share it with someone who might need it, or just reach out and let me know how it landed for you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm building something special here. Real stories, real life, real connection. One episode, one heart, and one story at a time. As always, with love. Oh, and this is the legal message, but mostly a message from my heart, and I just need to share this with you right now. Please know this podcast is offered solely for educational and entertainment purposes. If you find yourself triggered due to anything that was shared in this podcast, please seek professional help. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for mental health services. While I am a professional life coach, I am not a psychotherapist, nor am I a mental health clinician. So if you are struggling emotionally, please seek help, because you matter, you are important, and most of all, you are worthy of doing this work, the work that leads you to a better and healthier place. Okay? All right. Thank you. And please always make enough time to take care of yourself, and do so with love.